All right, buckle up because today we're going deep on a story that's, well, it's really something else. It's about Christopher Lunz.
Christopher Lunz.
Yeah, this guy, he was a convicted murderer, but he also claimed to be a serial killer, which, already pretty wild.
Okay, I'm listening.
But get this, he said he was only going after other criminals.
Wow, that's a twist. What kind of criminals?
He specifically targeted pedophiles and sex offenders.
So he was like a vigilante? I mean, that's some seriously murky moral territory.
No kidding, right? It's like, how do you even wrap your head around that?
I mean, it really throws a wrench into the typical true crime thing. Usually it's pretty clear who the bad guy is.
Exactly. And this guy, Lunz, he forces us to ask some really uncomfortable questions.
Like what?
Like, can someone who commits murder, can they also be, I don't know, some kind of messed up hero?
Right. And can you ever really justify taking the law into your own hands, even if you think you're going after the worst of the worst?
So many questions, and that's why we're doing this DDI. We're going to try to make sense of it all.
What do we have to work with?
Well, we've got some excerpts from his Wikipedia page, and the goal is to figure out, like, who was this guy really? What turned him into this, well, into what he became? And the big one, how much of what he claims was actually true?
Sounds like a challenge. Where do we even start with someone like this?
Well, let's start at the beginning. Christopher Lunz was born in New York back in 1967.
Okay, so bit of background.
Right. But there's not a whole lot out there about his early life.
Mysterious beginnings. Always adds to the intrigue.
For sure. But one thing we do know is that during his trial, he claimed his father was abusive.
Abusive how?
Like, physically abusive towards his mother, and he said his father was sexually abusive towards him.
Oh, wow, that's heavy. And he connected that to his hatred of pedophiles.
Yeah, he basically said that's where it all stemmed from, that this abuse he suffered, that's what made him hate pedophiles so much.
Okay, so we've got a possible motive there. But was it true?
Well, that's the thing. Those claims about his father, they were never actually confirmed.
So could be true, could be a way to get sympathy, maybe even try to justify his actions. Hard to say for sure.
Exactly. And that's one of the tricky things with this case. Was he telling the truth? Was he playing the victim? It's almost impossible to know for sure.
Right, so we got to take everything with a grain of salt.
Totally. And like you said, it makes things way more complicated.
Definitely adds to the mystery.
Okay, so moving on from his childhood, let's look at his adult life. And let me tell you, it's a bumpy ride. He struggled with crack cocaine addiction, spent 3 years in prison for auto theft in New Jersey.
Not exactly a model citizen.
Not even close. But there's this one incident, it's really messed up, like seriously disturbing. He confessed to almost molesting some kids.
He did? Oh man, that's awful.
Yeah, but then he claimed he stopped himself.
Wait, so he was gonna, but then decided not to.
That's what he said, but the really creepy part is he seemed almost proud of it.
Proud. How do you mean?
It was like he was trying to draw this line between himself and the criminals he was targeting. Like, hey, I may have thought about it, but I'm not a monster like them.
That is messed up. Like, it's killing. A twisted sense of morality, for sure.
Totally, like he was already building his case, even way back then.
Wow, that's insightful.
Well, eventually in 1999, he ends up in Sylva, North Carolina.
Okay, so new location, new chapter.
And this is where things get even more complicated. This is where he meets a guy named William Westerman, 23 years old, kind of lost, and Lunz takes him under his wing.
Almost like a father figure, huh?
Yeah, kind of ironic considering what happens next.
Okay, I'm sensing a turning point here. What happened?
Well, in 2003, Lunz's mom passed away, and she left his father a good chunk of money.
Ah, so inheritance comes into play.
Right, and here's where things go really dark. Lunz and Westerman, they travel down to Palm Harbor, Florida. They're going to visit Lunz's father, David.
Okay, road trip to see dad. What could go wrong?
Well, a lot, apparently. It starts as a normal visit, father and son, but then out of nowhere, it turns violent.
Luntz just snapped.
We don't know exactly what happened, but according to Westerman, Lunz attacks his father and then orders Westerman to shoot him.
Whoa, hold on. He made Westerman do it.
That's what Westerman said, and after that, they stole some stuff from the house, including a revolver.
A revolver, huh? That's going to be important later, isn't it?
You got it. It's like a real-life crime drama, except, way more intense.
No kidding. And I bet this murder didn't stay unsolved for long with that stolen revolver floating around.
Well, you'd think so, right? But actually, David Lunz's murder, it actually went unsolved for more than 2 years.
2 years. Wow, that's a long time. But I guess eventually I caught up with them.
Yep, and it was that stolen revolver that did him in.
Ah, so I was right. It came back to bite them.
Exactly. They found the gun and traced the serial number back to the crime scene.
And that led them to...
William Westerman.
Makes sense. So what happened to Westerman?
Well, he was facing some serious charges, obviously, but he cut a deal, agreed to testify against Lunz in exchange for a lighter sentence.
Classic prisoner's dilemma. Can't really blame him, though. I mean, facing life in prison.
Yeah, tough spot to be in, for sure. And Lunz, well, he didn't go down without a fight. During the trial, he decided to act as his own attorney.
Whoa, hold on. He represented himself. That's a bold move.
Right. And during the trial, he was completely denying everything, said he had nothing to do with the murder, tried to make Westerman look like a liar, like he was just trying to save his own skin.
But if they had the gun,
They did, and a bunch of other evidence too, witness statements, financial records, all pointing to Lunz. They even found evidence that suggested Lunz was after his father's inheritance.
sounds like they had a pretty strong case.
Oh yeah, the jury didn't buy any of Lunz's story. They found him guilty on all counts, but even when they were reading out the sentence, sentencing him to life in prison, Lunz just stood there. No remorse, nothing.
It's like he didn't even care.
It's actually crazier than that. Instead of, maybe apologizing or begging for mercy, he goes off on this wild rant. It went on for almost 45 minutes.
What? A rant? What was he talking about?
Okay, so get this. He starts claiming he's a serial killer. Says he's been going after pedophiles and sex offenders all this time.
Wait a minute. So he killed his father, and now he's claiming to be some kind of, vigilante serial killer?
And he gets even weirder. He starts demanding the death penalty.
He wanted to be executed. Why?
It's like he wanted to be seen as some kind of martyr, like he was doing the world a favor by getting rid of these bad guys.
I've got chills. It's just so disturbing. I mean, talk about controlling the narrative. Even facing life in prison, he's still trying to manipulate how people see him.
Exactly. But it doesn't end there. So he ends up in prison, right? Franklin Correctional Institution. And from there, he sends a letter to the police in Macon County, North Carolina.
Okay, a letter from prison. What did it say?
In the letter, he confesses to another murder, a guy named Gerald Estes.
Another murder. And who is this Estes guy? Just some random person?
Nope. Turns out Estes was a fugitive sex offender.
Ah, so it fits the pattern, the supposed vigilante thing.
Right. And in the letter, he describes how he and some other guy, he didn't name him, they picked up Estes, drove him out to some remote area, and killed him.
Sounds pretty straightforward. Case closed, right?
Not so fast. The thing is, he doesn't give any real specifics, like no location of the body, no evidence to back up his story, just his word.
So it's like a confession, but with no proof.
Yep, pretty much. So naturally, you'd think the police would just dismiss it, like, oh, it's just Lunz trying to get attention again.
But they didn't.
Actually, no, they took it pretty seriously. They were already looking for this Estes guy, and what Lunz described, it kind of lined up with what they knew about Estes and the case.
So they believed him.
It seems that way, at least enough to keep investigating, which is pretty chilling when you think about it. Like, even from behind bars, this guy could still be responsible for another person's death.
It's a terrifying thought. But also, what was he trying to accomplish with this confession? Was it real or just another manipulation?
Honestly, who knows? But unfortunately, it's not the last time Lunz gets violent.
Not the last time, you mean?
Yeah. He kills again, but this time it's inside the prison.
Oh man, this just keeps getting darker. What happened?
So, September 2009, Lunz takes another inmate hostage. He's got a shank, a homemade knife. Prison guards, they're trying to calm things down, get him to release the hostage. But then they find Lunz's cellmate dead.
He kills his cellmate.
Yeah. The guy's name was Nathaniel Taylor, 46 years old. And not surprisingly, he was a convicted child molester.
It's like this brutal cycle he can't escape. Violence, murder, it's all he seems to know.
And after that, obviously, things changed. They transfer him to Florida State Prison, maximum security.
The big house.
Yep. And just 30 hours later, Christopher Lunz takes his own life.
He committed suicide.
Yeah, it's like he wrote his own ending to this whole twisted story. And that's the thing about Christopher Lunz. He leaves us with more questions than answers. How many more victims were there? Were all those confessions true? What really drove him to do these things? Was it some warped sense of justice or something even darker?
It's a mystery we might never solve.
I mean, it's almost like he wanted to have the final say, even in death, leaving behind all this chaos and all these unanswered questions. Like, what if there are more victims out there, people we don't even know about because Lunz took their stories to the grave with him?
It's a chilling thought, and it really makes you think, like, how can someone be so brutal, so violent, but at the same time think there's some kind of, hero? Like, how do those two things even exist in the same person?
Yeah, it's like, was he really trying to make the world a better place? Or was it just, I don't know, was he just really messed up?
Right, like, did he actually believe all that stuff about bringing justice? Or was it all a cover story, a way to, rationalize all the horrible things he was doing?
It's hard to say. I mean, the human mind is a strange thing.
It really is. Maybe it was a bit of both. Maybe part of him really did think he was doing some good, even while he was, giving in to all that darkness inside him.
It's definitely unsettling because it means there are people out there like Lunz, people who to be capable of anything, and we'd never even suspect it.
It's true, and it also shows just how hard it is to deal with people like him, people who just don't fit into the normal categories of, good and bad.
Right. So after all this, after going throughout the stuff about Lunz, what do you think is the most important thing to take away from it all?
Well, I think it's a good reminder to always be thinking critically. Don't just accept what you hear at face value, especially when it comes to someone like Lunz. I mean, he was a master manipulator.
Yeah, always question everything.
Exactly. And I think it also shows that sometimes, even with all our laws and systems, we can't always understand the why. Why someone would do the things Lunz did. It's just there are some mysteries that we may never solve.
It's true, and maybe that's the scariest part of it all.
Yeah. But even though it's scary, I think it's important to learn from these cases. Try to understand what makes people like Loons tick. Maybe if we can figure that out, we can prevent something like this from happening again.
Well, that about wraps up our deep dive into the world of Christopher Lunz, and it definitely was a deep dive, a dark one too. I don't know about you, but this is one of those stories that's going to stick with me for a while. It really makes you think about the line between good and evil and how blurry it can get sometimes.
No kidding. And it also makes you realize that we all have a responsibility to be informed, to be aware, and to never stop questioning the world around us.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So, to everyone listening, if this case has you curious, if you want to learn more, do it. There's a ton of information out there. Go explore it.
That's what it's all about. Never stop learning.
And on that note, we're going to wrap things up for today. But remember, the conversation doesn't have to end here. Keep thinking, keep questioning, and we'll catch you on our next deep dive.
Until then, stay curious. 8 Green 6.